There's been a lot of interesting stats kind of floating around the internet, namely that 27% of all full-time employees are now Gen Z, and that 2024, this year, is the year that Gen Z is going to officially overtake boomers in the workplace. So I know a lot of people, including myself, have sort of been thinking about Gen Z as, teenagers, they're the interns, but they're here, they're in the workforce, and it's something that every organization really needs to start thinking about, how to attract and connect with this demographic and this generation in order to really survive and thrive as an organization. And sort of related back to EditMate, which is my company, we're an employer brand video platform. And we basically help companies create video content with their real employees, with our software, and then also get that raw, authentic footage edited into on-brand, shareable videos that is great for employer brand, talent acquisition, and recruitment marketing content on social media and beyond. Because as we sort of know, Gen Z grew up in a very different world than, the generations before them. They've been highly online. Mobile phones were a part of their lives a lot earlier, and they sort of just use the internet differently. And also because of, world events in the last couple decades, they sort of have different expectations for what their workplace, their career aspirations, and all kinds of things like that. So I wanted to sort of dive into all of those topics today. So we're going to be talking to Da'Shawn Hines, who is a card-carrying member of the Gen Z generation, and also works in recruitment marketing at Delaware North, which is one of the largest hospitality and entertainment companies in the world. So he's also a professional in this space. And also with Nicole Stevens, who also works in recruitment marketing at Floor & Decor and has a ton of experience in the employer brand, recruitment marketing, and talent acquisition space. We're going to be in conversation today, and I have a few questions that I got emailed to us before that I'll ask at the end. And if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we'll answer them. And then I'll let Nicole and Da'Shawn take it away from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you for joining us and educating all of us on all things Gen Z. So the first question we're going to start off with is super broad. Rachel mentioned a lot of, reports coming out around what you all care about, but what do you wish that people knew about Gen Z?
Yeah, and first I want to thank Rachel and Nicole for having me on today. It really means a lot to come and speak to everybody. And getting back to your question and what I wish they knew is that trust and flexibility goes a long way. And I know that trust is often earned, not given. But I think it also comes into play with how you phrase the language you use around, maybe some tasks that you're giving Gen Z in terms of, all right, well, we need this completed by a certain date, by a certain time, and we want your perspective on, what you did, how you did it, and maybe a way to improve it for the next person that does it. I think that kind of language goes a really long way.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you're considering, a new employer, what are some of the things that you look for?
One of the things that I often think isn't really talked a lot about in school is career progression. What does it look like for you, and what does that mean for you in terms of if you want to move up the ladder or if you maybe want to move side to side in a different area? I think these are all things that go into, the question that you highlighted. And then also when you look up and you see your manager, do they have the type of life that you want, that could be you one day? So I think that's also a big factor as well.
That's such a good one. Looking up at your manager and kind of evaluating if that's where you want to head. And I wish I had that advice a lot of years ago. So when you're talking with your friends, about job searching and careers, like what other topics come up?
Uh, for me specifically would be community involvement. How are they impacting the community and the surrounding people around them? Um, is definitely a big topic for myself. Trying to, be more involved in the community. I myself volunteer my time at some community centers locally here in Buffalo. So seeing, their impact as well is definitely something, along with, the community values and how it aligns with yourself.
That's awesome. And that's really cool that you volunteer locally as well as with your organization. So the actual process of job searching has changed a lot from boomers to Gen X to millennials, and obviously now Gen Z. So when you are looking for open roles, where are you?
I think for me, it would be LinkedIn is one of the top ones, especially within that 24-hour window. I know you can search by because when a lot of things may not be on your side. I think time is one of the things that you can really utilize, being in that first
Mhm.
24-hour window to give you a better chance of, your application being seen. Also, I think LinkedIn is great because you get to see where your connections work and maybe where their connections work as well. So getting, asking their connections, if they work at a company, how do you enjoy it? What are you, most looking forward to? What is your outlook on the company, and things of that nature?
Yeah, doing research that way is so critical and a really good way to differentiate yourself, but also learn a little bit of the behind the scenes for sure. So for millennials, for a long time, Rachel, you probably remember this, the companies that people were obsessed with were FANGs. And, a lot of the talk was about getting into a FANG company. So are there any companies or industries or like groups of companies that are essentially the new fangs for Gen Z that you all like kind of look up to and elevate a little bit as a potential employer?
Yeah, and I think that group is still around and very strong today. For me personally, I looked at, okay, I played basketball in college. I would like to be around, some sort of sport. Um, in a company that I work for, what are the global headquarters in my hometown or wherever I'm going to be living that I can reach out to and maybe get, somebody in person to talk to that maybe, like I said earlier, a connection on LinkedIn. So for me, it was, the top companies are great and would be nice to work at, but it was also about like kind of that personal hometown, Buffalo touch that I was looking for.
Yeah, love that. And so, related to that, a lot of studies have come out and research and talking points around return to office, like RTO, and hybrid and remote work incessantly over the last few years. But in talking to some Gen Z people, like they're actually more interested in hybrid and even in the office to get that connection that you were just referencing. So, where do you fall on the, in the office, hybrid, and remote kind of scale in terms of your work preference?
Yeah, so give it a little background. I've worked now fully in person, I've done hybrid, and I've done remote in my short career. And I think that, depending on what industry you're in, obviously being in recruitment marketing, there are some benefits to being in person. And I would say that the leaning towards the hybrid schedule is definitely something that I would say would have a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can you just give the example that you provided earlier about the specific benefit of being in person and what you're able to sort of do based on where you sit and who you interact with?
Yeah, for sure. So, um, my role specifically, there can be a lot of overlap with, different departments in terms of if we're doing a media campaign or if we're doing a ad for a recruiter in a specific hiring event or team member event. And I think sitting next to some of them would help in terms of feedback and how we could essentially make each other better.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And I have a very similar experience now being in the office. So company culture is a big topic that comes out a lot in content marketing for talent acquisition and employer brand. And you touched a little bit on the volunteer and local aspects. Are there any other parts of company culture that you find important for companies to share as you're job searching that you really want to know about before you know, apply and go through the interview process?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think one of the things that I've also been able and had the pleasure to work on is team member stories, getting those up and really putting a visual, either whether it's on the website or um, on LinkedIn or different, social media outlets and things like that. Just putting
Mhm.
a picture or a name to the face, as you will, and then being able to let them speak for themselves and how they enjoyed their time with the company, um, and where they kind of see themselves in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love working on employee stories. They're so much fun. And last question, kind of for you specifically before we transition to your work in this space, are there any creators or brands that you follow and really appreciate their content in terms of like career tips or behind the scenes or company culture or anything in that kind of talent acquisition, recruitment marketing vein?
So I will say, I'm
Besides
born,
Delaware North, who's
yeah.
crushing it.
I will say I'm a little boring. I like the investor content on YouTube. So these would
Okay.
be kind of uh, programs like Minority Mindset, The Money Guy Show, and The Graham Stephan Show. These are things that go into investing, heavily in investor content, news, and things of that nature. And I think this will be growing in terms of people seeing that, people are living longer and we need to be able to put more money away for the long term and have that money grow and work for us. And I also saw this trend when I worked at Damon University, and financial literacy was one of the topics that was growing while I was there for the students.
That's awesome that that initiative was in place. And how long typically are these like videos that you watch? Is it shorts? Is it more long form? Or can you speak to that a little bit?
I would say, depending on the time, I really switch between both. I do like the longer videos because it goes a little bit more in depth in terms of maybe what's happening now, in terms of headlines, or the political climate and things like that, and on a global scale, how that impacts uh, the stock market as well. So I would say
Mm,
the longer videos are really where it's at. I know everybody likes the short clips and the attention grabbing and all that stuff, but when you really sit down and look at, they're putting so much time and investing so much time that the final product is definitely worth it.
yeah, interesting. And it makes sense that people, you know, we're used to scrolling and our thumbs are probably so strong now it's, you know, insane. But I think when we get interested in a topic, then we're more willing to devote, you know, that time to kind of watching those longer form videos. Like years ago, I was watching McKinsey videos because I thought I wanted to go into consulting. So I was watching their, you know, videos on how to interview in that style and willing to devote that time because at the time I was really interested in that. So, okay, that's awesome to hear. And so, switching a little bit to your work in this space now, can you tell us a little bit about what your team is doing to, you know, focus on the preferences and needs of your generation?
Yeah, for sure. And it would be focusing on maybe a platform that they would see not only, I would say an example would be Handshake. Now, this is a place
Mhm.
that is mainly used for internships and things like that, but their eyes are going to be there. And if there's a
Yep.
chance that, you can maybe catch some extra eyes in that age range, I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. And so, are there any other platforms like Handshake that you are investing time in right now or have on your radar for the future?
I think so. Handshake has been fairly new for us, so it'll be building that out as well. We um, run some campaigns on there that I've been directly involved with,
Nice.
and writing copy for and things like that. Just trying to use language that really relates to maybe what they're looking for.
Hmm. That's awesome. Are there any other kind of tips and tricks aside from using language that will resonate with Gen Z when you're creating content, for this audience?
Touching on kind of the point you brought up earlier in terms of, strong thumbs and kind of having the shorter clips. I would say that keeping, things concise and to the point is definitely, something that, we're working on. Um, that for a job description, they're really, in my opinion, it really needs to be right to the point. Some things always don't need to be explained in terms of, like what are the main, bullet points that this person will be responsible for. I think is definitely very helpful.
Yeah, the classic and other duties as assigned at the bottom of all JDs. Yeah, we're actually I'm undertaking the same project right now, trying to like shorten them. People spend so little time on those that it's really important to make them concise. So definitely we can chat tips offline about that. And then last question, because I think there was some sent as well. How do you at Delaware North showcase your culture and values for Gen Z, but really for everyone as well? Like, do you focus a lot on social content? Is it email campaigns? Like you mentioned, Handshake. Like, what avenues are you focusing on for this type of content?
I think a lot of it is definitely social media and content in that way, and also um, having some projects that I can't speak to yet, but that will be coming out fairly soon that I'm excited to see come into the public eye that I think will be very great in terms of getting another look, another angle into some of the things that we have going on.
Nice. We'll stay tuned for sure. That's awesome. That's awesome. And Rachel, were there any questions that came in?
So one that we got emailed, and this kind of spoke to a topic we talked about last month with Abby when we talked about employer branding in general, is from your own experience from working at Delaware North and just sort of being, a person in the world and on the internet. What kind of content do you think is the most powerful and impactful for job applicants, especially Gen Z, like when they're researching a company, like for you, the stuff you're putting out for Delaware North, or maybe you were interested in seeing when you were looking for a job? Like, is it, employee testimonials, day in the life videos, more info about, the company mission and values? Like, what are the things that really get your attention and you think companies should sort of invest a bit more time and energy into creating?
One of the highlights that I think goes into it a lot on LinkedIn would be like our portrayal and the capturing we do for our internship program.
Mm.
It is great in terms of how they capture what's really going on behind the scenes in the internship program and how they weave the company's values into it as well. Having a visual aspect to it is also great, and then you get the involvement from people in the internship, and that just it spreads from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that I keep reading a lot about, and this is something that I feel like, I don't know if it was like fully available when I was like starting out in the career, is sort of this idea of like having, when you join a company and have the career trajectory in mind, like does Delaware North do a lot with like career development and mentoring and sort of thinking like, you can start at this job and move up this way or go on this track? Is that something that you guys focus on a lot?
And this really started way back when I was um, just starting with the company and seeing and having conversations with my manager in terms of where do you see yourself? I know everybody says where you see yourself in 5 years, but
Mm.
we did it a little bit closer than 5 years just to seeing, what your short-term versus long-term goals are, how that aligns with maybe a position that is or a department that's within the company, or also maybe trying to create your own path as well. So I think that Delaware North has done a great job seeing where your values and your interests are and how it can really shape that next step within the company.
Ah, cool. That makes a lot of sense. And then also purely from like we got another question about this over email is, I think the Gen X millennials, when we sort of do our searching online, it tends to just like you immediately go to Google and type something in. And
Hmm.
I'm sort of learning now more and more that Gen Z is they sort of are going to YouTube immediately or TikTok, and that's actually how they're getting a lot of their information because it is sort of like an immediate testimonial from like a real person. Have
Hmm.
you been thinking about that at Delaware North or from your own experience? Is it are those social media platforms becoming more of a standard search engine?
I would think so. And doing a little bit of research into other companies like Amazon and things like that, they have, direct YouTube links in some of their pages so that
Mm,
it directly aligns with, what you just mentioned. And I think it's, ultimately getting that testimonial from a person is the next step. And that's what has really allowed some of these companies, the FANG companies, I believe you called it, to really thrive.
that makes sense. And one last question that we get is corporate initiatives and showcasing like big corporations' commitments to nonprofits and other like volunteer organizations, like you talked about. Is seeing that a company you're curious about working for, that they sort of are dedicating time and money into investments like that. Do you think that's something that is more and more important to Gen Z and aligns with what they're interested in learning about when they're researching a company?
Yeah, because I think that not only aligning with the company's core values, but also aligning with the individual's values as well is definitely very important. It's definitely, we've had multiple, outings while I've been here at Delaware North that I've been able to be a part of, cleaning up the community. We have a field day coming up pretty soon. So things of that nature, and then also being able to capture that and have that, be somewhere that somebody that's researching your company can access fairly easily is very important.
Yeah, great. And this is more from our last question because I know we're just about at time at 11:30. How would you, from your experience, like as a Gen Z, one thing we're always doing is sort of providing our customers information about how they can encourage their employees to submit employee-generated video or user-generated video to contribute to projects for video content. Is there any kind of like tips or tricks that you can think of off the top of your head? Like if Delaware North was to ask you to submit an employee testimonial, like what would you say would be a way to make it as easy as possible?
So I'm submitting this internally, and
Yeah.
that okay.
Mhm.
Um, I think the easiest way would be to send out an example that has worked really well in the that's already live. Like I mentioned earlier with Amazon having their testimonials, and I would just say try to kind of have a conversation like this where you really can put your own input into it as well.
Mm. Awesome. All right, great. Well, we're at 11:30 now. Thank you so much, Da'Shawn and Nicole, for joining us today. I think we learned a lot about Gen Z and a lot of interesting stuff to think about. So thanks so much, and we really appreciate your time.